Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Curl up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing.
We're glad you're here.
Happy listening.
Here in the U.S., we often treat democracy and capitalism like they're the same thing, as if freedom to vote and the freedom to shop are just two sides of the same coin. But they're not actually the same system. Democracy is about political equality, one person and one vote. Capitalism is about economic freedom, private ownership, profit. They overlap, they clash, and they shape each other. But do they always have to go hand in hand?
You know, I often use this analogy, but it reminds me of that classic math class teaser. Every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. So my question is democracy the square and capitalism is the rectangle, or is it the other way around? Either way, we're told that in America, you can't have one without the other. But is it possible that that's just the story that we've been sold?
Well, and that story we've been sold has roots in American history, fairly recently even. During the Cold War, the United States packaged democracy and capitalism as a matching set. Our free elections and our free markets were branded as proof we were better than the Soviets. That branding stuck. So much so that a lot of Americans now think if you question capitalism, you're questioning democracy itself. But the truth is, they're not always soulmates. Sometimes they look more like squabbling roommates trying to share the same space. So today, we're digging into the similarities and the differences, where they work together and where they don't, and whether democracy and capitalism really need each other, or if we just like to pretend they do. Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom.
I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
Mom. So this has been an interesting one for us to start a discussion on.
Well, I feel like we really kind of touched on it in last week's episode, and I can't even remember. So I'm talking about the DEI episode when we were talking about legislating and morality and diversity and all of these things, like how that all works. And well, in order for it to be a mandate by a corporation, it has to be clearly defined and all of this. And so it kind of sent us off on this related tangent. And the more I started digging in, the more I was just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so I think part of that is just me doing my own learning, educating myself on some of this and getting out of that, well, this is what it is. So this is what we've taught you all of your life, whether that's school or cultural or society, saying, hey, is that really true? Is that really the actual definition, or is that just what I've always been told? And so it was so much fun. And that sounds so corny, but it really was. It was so much fun to sit down and start working through all of these things and figuring out where it all does mesh and where it diverts from each other and where the overlap is, kind of the full Venn diagram of it. Like, what are the similarities? What are the differences? And does every society that is a democratic society require capitalism? Does every capitalistic society require democracy? Or like I said in the intro, is that just what we've been sold, especially as Americans?
Yeah, the way that I was kind of thinking about it, like you mentioned, in a democracy, one person, one voice equals one vote. And the way I equated it to capitalism is dollars equate to votes. Where I think those two really start to clash is when you start to now have a concentration. So you have individuals or corporations that have such a concentration of wealth that now they get to exert kind of an overweighted influence on the system. Because in our case, personally, I think that we've gotten to the point where they're a little bit too entangled. They're a little bit too close to each other, too related now.
I find myself wondering if the founding fathers came back, what they would say. I mean, do you think they would just go, what the hell is going on here? Because I don't think this was their intention. And I don't think they had the capability to
I mean, it's
look at.
hard to foresee the level of advancement that we have achieved. And
Sure.
there are things where I think the founding fathers would look at it and say, wow, this is exactly what our intention was. These certain aspects as a society we have done really, really well. And then I think there are other aspects where they would look at it and say, guys, what are you doing? This is exactly what we tried to warn you about.
Exactly. So let's get some definitions down. You know, those are my thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about democracy first. So democracy truly is a political system. It is ruled by the people. The core principle is political equality equals one person, one vote. So everybody's vote counts the same. One person, one vote. No matter what's in your bank account, no matter how much pull you have, one person, one vote, right? And democracy requires mechanisms like elections and rule of law and protection of those rights. So, again, ideally, in a perfect democracy, your voice matters the same as your neighbors. Callie's voice matters the same as not only Mecca and Cole, but also the same as Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. We all have the same level of pull, right? So I want to point out that, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past. While America is not technically solely a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. There are some differences in that, as we're a representative democracy. So we're still utilizing the democratic process to say, my one vote goes towards this person and your one vote goes towards this person too. So we're going to elect those people to then make choices and decisions for us. They are being represented by other people that we have elected. We have chosen for them to make calls and determinations and rules for us.
That's a good distinction. I'm glad you added that.
Yeah. Where I think we start to get into the issue is with that meshing of the form of capitalism that we are utilizing, with that marriage of our political, supposedly democratic system mixes with the capitalist system of capital. We have, and we've alluded to and referenced and mentioned this in several podcasts previously. We have a lobbyist system. You have the revolving door in US government where these large corporations have such an outweighed influence. People with extremely high net worths that have control of these corporations have such an overweighted influence that they're being represented oftentimes, but the people who make up the vast majority of the population aren't.
Or the
Yeah.
people who make up the vast majority of those corporations aren't.
Sure.
And I think that that's worth noting, because if you looked at corporations as a representative democracy, you could say, hey, all of these people who work for Amazon get to vote on their thing. And that's how Jeff goes. That's how he uses his influence. That's how he uses his power. But that isn't the case. That is not at all what's going on. And so I think that that's part that needs to be. And we can, maybe I should have pulled up various corporations. I mean, but look at somebody like a Patagonia, who is now a corporation that is owned by the employees primarily, or we've talked about a couple of grocery stores that are that way. So when somebody is walking out to their car at the end of the night and sees a cart out of place, they go grab it and put it back, because that's more money in their pocket that they get to keep at the end of the day, because they don't have to hire the person to go manage and wrangle all of the carts. And so I think that we can look at all of these different corporations that, like Cole said, their influence is outsized by, or how do I say that right? Their influence is managed by an outsize of their population, of their corporation, whatever that is, versus somebody who is managed by the people across the board and all have ownership stake in it and how they value it. You know what I mean? I think that there's a
Yeah.
difference.
So when we run through capitalism and kind of the definition of that, you talk about private ownership of resources and a means of production. You talk about market competition, prioritizing profits, which in some cases can be used and is kind of intended to drive innovation. Whoever has the best product gets the largest share of the market. And to me, that's reasonable. What I see happening, unfortunately, is we've now kind of got this clash of feudalism with our representative democracy. And these fiefdoms, if you will, these mega corporations have so much influence just because they have such a high concentration of capital that those people that we are electing ourselves to represent us end up representing whoever can make the biggest donation, whoever can make the most donations.
And really representing themselves so that they
Well,
can
yeah.
maintain power, so that they can maintain authority. And it doesn't really have a lot to do with us
I
as
started to say it takes
constituents.
away that one person, one vote because it puts dollars behind it. And so it it takes away the impact of that individual's vote who who isn't willing to pay or can't afford to pay. It
Right,
takes away their influence.
right.
Well, yeah, and then you start to run into these particular issues where because they need to keep donors donating so that they can maintain their individual influence, well, now they're making decisions that are beneficial to those donors but detrimental to the vast majority of the population in some instances.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely changes the power of one voice, one vote. It lessens it, right?
Well, I mean, it effectively neutralizes it, in my personal opinion.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean it neutralizes it?
I can go and vote for whoever I want to, and just because the person that I vote for wins and is the person that is elected doesn't mean they're representing me, because they have to represent the concentration of capital. They have to represent capital's interests, not not the interests of all of their individual constituents. Now, on a certain level, they kind of have to do both, but oftentimes we see that more as spin than actual representation.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, they can't go and say, everybody in my district now has to work for minimum wage for this mega corporation. It's not that extreme, but still, the the legislation that ends up getting passed oftentimes is of more benefit, again, to either the representatives or the concentration of capital that those representatives are now, because they took the piece of cake. Now they have to pander to whoever gave them the cake. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do think that it makes sense, but I think it muddies the waters at the same time. And maybe I don't know how to get past that.
Get past what exactly?
I mean, the muddy waters of it because I don't know. I don't know.
So let's talk about what we as Americans think of as freedom, because I think this is where it gets kind of
Muddy.
muddy and combined. And I have to say, I might be a little bit embarrassed, and I think that's my history, is that somehow it's come together that freedom and economy, capitalism have been linked so closely together that it feels un-American not to support capitalism. And it just doesn't, if you really stop and look at it, just it's kind of like, wait, why?
Well,
How did that come to be?
yeah, and I think that that was kind of the most fascinating part to me because, Mom, I'm right there with you from a little bit of an embarrassed about my own knowledge of history standpoint. But the more I dug in, the more I started going, oh, wait, here was this one little thing that somebody said, hey, let's look over here, and started distracting from other things so that we can send this specific message. I mean, I'm a career marketer, and I sat here going, oh my God, this is all marketing. This is all fluff.
Optics.
Optics. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I
So,
think you really see that when you look at the Cold War and it's the US against the Soviets, and we start, and that seems to kind of be where it started to get entwined
well, but
because
let's go back. Go back here. When Thomas Jefferson was originally putting together all of the framework of this country and was putting that together with the other founding fathers, when he originally wrote Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness, it was not Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. It was life, liberty, and property.
because you had to be a property owner to really have a vote.
Right. So automatically capitalism is starting to be baked into those freedoms of ours. You know, we talk about the American dream, and I saw an article just this week that was talking about the American dream now costs $5 million. What it takes to be educated, to have a comfortable retirement, to afford quality health care, to own a home, to raise your family. $5 million is kind of the bare minimum for achieving the American dream right now. I mean, you've got all kinds of blended political liberties and economic opportunities as if they're completely inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. And then you go into, again, it's all freaking marketing, y'all. You go into World War II, and after that, you had advertising campaigns that were urging Americans to buy war bonds. Not because it was better for you, but because it's better for our country. To buy consumer goods as your patriotic duty. I mean, we talked about this the other day. I so like specifically remember after 9/11, George Bush coming out saying Americans need to go shopping. This is how we're going to show our resilience, equating our consumerism, our consumption with our national strength and freedom to the rest of the world. Go shopping.
Because we can
and
spend, we are mighty.
Yeah,
on a certain level, that's not wrong.
it isn't.
I mean,
It
that's
isn't.
really where, if you want to talk about our ability to really the reason that we were victorious in World War II, obviously the support of the other allied nations is important there, which
Yes.
we're all largely democratic capitalist nations at that point. But the ability for those corporations to turn on the manufacturing, well, in order to do that, they have to get fed capital.
Money.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and so they essentially got this huge infusion of cash in order to start manufacturing these goods that were needed to win the war, funded by things like war bonds, where the American people go out and they say, hey, we're going to buy these war bonds. These war bonds are essentially the exact same thing. I mean, in essence, they are a lot like a treasury bill or a treasury note, where you're going and you're saying, hey, I'm going to give the government this cash for them to use on whatever they need. And then the government takes that cash from the war bond and sends it to these corporations to pay for tanks, oil, metal fabrication, plane engines, rifles, ammunition. They're taking this influx of cash, injecting it into the economy that now allows these producers that are privately owned to go through and say, all right, now we've got the capital, let's ramp up production. We can pay more workers. We can buy more materials. We can build bigger factories.
Yeah. You don't come to have the most robust military in the world without spending money to do it. We
Yeah.
just outspent everybody else.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
If I have a table and I have 5 apples on that table and there are 10 people that want that apple, how much are those apples worth?
More.
Compared to if I have 100 apples and 10 people want those apples. It is on a certain level supply and demand, and the money supply is much higher now than it has ever been historically, meaning that there are more dollars available, inherently reducing the value of those dollars because the supply is larger. The demand doesn't even have to change, but because the supply is larger, now each individual unit of that supply is inherently worth less. That's part of the system that has been co-opted by this marriage of capitalism and democracy, because you have these huge megacorps that have these massive concentrations of wealth, these massive concentrations of capital, that are now utilizing it to influence, and not a one person equals one vote, but $1 equals one vote. Because they have so many more dollars, and there are so many more dollars in circulation in the supply, and it all just continues to get concentrated and more concentrated, that's how we're ending up in this kind of pseudo feudalism system that we're referring to. Well, we're talking about the marriage of capitalism and democracy, and how capitalism has kind of overtaken, we feel that capitalism has overtaken our democracy. But there are some kind of finer details that are less talked about, that are cause of that, and that are exacerbating that.
And you think that's inflation?
Well, inflation is a part of the equation, but inflation is a result of the inputs that are causing more inflation. We're talking about democracy. My vote and Callie's vote have equal weight. So if Callie and I vote for the same person, but we want that person to do slightly different things, but I can donate $1 million to their campaign and Callie can only donate $1, who has more influence over that representative?
You do.
Who does or who should?
Who does?
Right. Because that, I think, is a really specific sticking point here. Who does and who should are not the same answer.
Right. And we can talk about who should all day long. That doesn't change the reality of who does. So we were talking about, you had mentioned something about it makes you feel un-American to question capitalism. And I think that that is pretty easily linkable to the marketing, the branding, the optics that Callie mentions from World War II into the Cold War.
Yeah.
You've got McCarthyism in there to say, oh, the Reds are bad. You've got the Red Scare.
Yeah.
Anyone who believes in communism or any form of socialism is un-American. Anyone who questions the system is un-American, which to me, that mentality that you can't question this is un-American in and of itself. But it got branded as the most American to say, if you're not for capitalism, you're not for democracy.
Okay. So let's step back to that part where we're talking about that branding and the link there, because I think that's a big component of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had in the Cold War, post World War II, the U.S. positioned itself as a leader of the free world. Nobody else did that for us. Nobody else came out and said this was what it is. We just
We
kind
had
of
all these
took that
allies, but
title.
they're not saying that. We're the ones saying we're the rescuers. We can
Right.
do this.
We fixed
We're
it.
the leader.
We are the most powerful. That's
Yeah.
branding, right? And we're the leader of the free world. Everybody else has just as much capability as we do, but we're going to take the title.
You know, I don't know
Being
that
that-
that's fair to say, though,
What do you
because not
mean?
everybody had the same capability. Because without the U.S. presence in World War II, Europe was losing. Asia was losing. They had to have the manufacturing base, the economic base of the United States to come in and say, hey, we're going to out-manufacture you. Our tanks may not be as good, but we've got 20 times as many.
Yeah. But I think that's our point is that it became a link between assuming or understanding that freedom only related to goods that could be produced. So because America could produce more goods, then it was more free, or it was standing for freedom. And I'm not sure that those are really supposed to be linked.
Well,
I mean,
you had, again, more marketing of slogans like freedom isn't free. Freedom costs money, right? Freedom in politics and freedom in markets were sold as the same thing. And I think
more of
that's
that
why,
linkage.
right. I think that's why I sit here and was so kind of impacted by the history of all of this, these little tiny nods that turned into huge monumental wave makers to make sure that those two stayed linked.
I think it's that marketer in you that just saw this as this is a branding
strategy.
This is marketing. Yeah. Strategy. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, this is a branding marketing strategy so we can make everybody believe the same thing. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant. We want everybody to think the same thing and go there immediately. You know, the American dream became a hybrid of both. I want the freedom to vote and the freedom to buy a house. I want the freedom to have children and build my wealth. And so it was marketed all in this way, in this strategy to say, hey, they're one and the same. The Cold War advertising literally marketed consumer goods as proof that democracy was superior. Look, all the Soviets are standing there in bread lines. We have 31 flavors of ice cream. And so my question becomes, is the pairing of democracy and capitalism authentic? Or is that just propaganda that stuck? Marketing
that we were taught.
I think it's both, honestly. But I think that there is more nuance within capitalism. Capitalism is a relatively broad term in the way that we're utilizing it, but there are different versions. There are different methods of utilizing capitalism. And I think that the system that we're using right now, again, we've referenced this before, and I'm sure this is something that we need to go into greater detail on, but Citizens United specifically allows corporations to be treated as individuals under the law, meaning that a corporation also has free speech, which to a certain degree I understand until they start utilizing that speech, that concentration of wealth, to exercise outweighed influence.
Well, and it's like you were talking earlier, Callie, if you're not representing the individuals that make up that corporation and you just have one person calling those shots, regardless of what everybody within that group agrees on or votes on, then it's a difference. That has weighted that one vote, that corporation vote, completely different from my vote.
Right.
Because of that lack of separation of capitalism and democracy, it allows those with outweighed influence to create rules that prevent other people from having their own influence, from outweighing the influence of that corporation, that fiefdom, essentially.
That's why I want you to go back and you say that when Callie asked the question, is the pairing authentic or propaganda? You said you think it's both. I can see the propaganda real easy. This is what you've been taught in school. I mean, it's like you say, here are the bread lines in the Soviet Union. Here's 31 flavors over here. Here's have it your way. So talk to me about why you think it is authentic that they're combined.
Like Callie talks about, you have to have certain rights that are protected in order for a democracy to function as it's intended. When you start having one group of people's rights being protected on an outsized scale relative to the individual, that kind of no longer becomes the case, because the corporation's wants and needs are now more important than the wants and needs of the individuals who make up that corporation, like you're talking about. However, we know that capitalism has a tendency to drive innovation because the people who own the means of production, let's take Elon Musk, for example. Elon Musk doesn't have the government telling him what he can and cannot make or can and cannot spend money on. So he has been able to, not just himself alone, but he has been able to focus a pretty considerable amount of wealth towards things like space travel, where they have made some serious innovations. Electric and autonomous vehicles, where they have made some pretty significant innovations because they have the freedom to allocate their capital as they desire.
Okay. So because that corporation has freedom, then you think it is authentic that they have a say. Am I getting that right? But
Not exactly.
because that's not democracy to me. That doesn't, and so I'm still
But
trying
it is
to.
a byproduct of, it is a part of democracy. Having those freedoms, those rights that are guaranteed, if you will, that are protected, gives them the ability, the freedom to think differently, to have that innovation. The
Versus,
problem,
say, socialism.
to a certain degree,
Okay.
yes, versus compared to other political systems
Yeah.
where, and that's not to say that other political systems cannot have innovation. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm
Right.
trying to say that historically speaking, at least what we have been sold is that capitalism offers more opportunity for that innovation because you have the freedom to pick what you're in.
Yeah.
That is similar to a free market where the best product wins, as opposed to the product that we tell you to buy is the one you're going to buy. Because in that instance, there is no competition. There's nothing.
Well, and there's no democracy there.
Right. Because you're just being allocated resources by whoever determines what resources you need. Instead of
Okay.
saying, I have the ability to grow my resources to utilize them how I see fit.
I'm still not sure that I agree with you about the pairing being authentic, because I can just see other measures that don't have it paired in other instances. So I'm just not sure that I can really agree with you that the pairing is authentic. I think
Can you give me some examples?
maybe authentic is the wrong word. Maybe what you're thinking is that, I'm sorry.
Necessary.
No, that's not even what I was thinking. It's helpful. It promotes it,
Convenient.
but I don't know that it really requires them to be paired. Does that make sense?
I would tend to agree with you. I don't think that it is a requirement for one or the other, for democracy or capitalism to go hand in hand. But I think that, especially depending on your perspective, it is very convenient for us to say that they do.
Yeah. And I just think the more history I read and the more that we do kind of talking through this, that we've been sold a bill of goods that definitely links those
Sure.
and says, you're greater because you're richer. You're greater because of your freedoms. You're greater because you're not the Soviet Union. It just, sometimes that's true, but not all the time does it link to because you're richer or because you have this society that runs on money.
Well, and I think that part of it is, Mom, I think so much of it is, this is the part I'm not supposed to say. I think so much of it is kind of a sham. I think that we're saying, or we're being sold that bill of goods, that you must have democracy for the sake of capitalism, or you must have capitalism for the sake of democracy, because somebody else who is in power and wants to maintain their power wants you to feel like you have a choice. I go back to I've mentioned it before, but the whole Don't Mess with Texas campaign, A, is 100% marketing, and B, took root because the people who were doing it for the state of Texas knew that you couldn't go to a Texan and say, hey, pick up your own trash, much less somebody else's. Hey, don't litter. It doesn't work. But the moment that we created pride in the state of Texas, it did a whole reverse psychology thing. Not only am I going to be better about not littering, I'm going to be pissed off at somebody else who's messing with my Texas.
Yeah.
And so I think that reverse psychology is being put to use here and saying, hey, you have all of these freedoms. You should go vote. You should do all of this because you're allowed to. And that's what makes us so great. But then on the back end, kind of behind the scenes in the source code, if you will, it's all linking back up to so that I can maintain power, so that I can maintain an outsized wealth of knowledge, wisdom, power, money, control.
I understand what you're saying about there not needing to be an inherent link between democracy and capitalism. And I would agree with you to a certain extent on that, because I think that in our current system, they are too linked. They are not separate enough.
Yeah.
I still think that generally capitalism combined with democracy is probably one of the more efficient methodologies, more efficient systems available to us. I'm not saying it's the only one available to us, but I do think that it is, from what I have witnessed, probably the best. Now, I certainly think that that is not unconditional. And I think, again, that as of right now, with the policies that we have in place, they're a little bit too closely joined, too married, if you will, because the effects of capitalism are dominating the methodology of democracy.
That makes sense. Yeah, I get that completely.
I just think that it's very complex. It's not just black and white.
Yeah. Few things are.
Few things are. And Callie, I think you're spot on. I think the branding, the marketing of it plays a huge role.
I think we're just so accustomed. I think we, particularly as Americans, have, and I hate to use this word, but this is the word that comes to mind, brainwashed about this, of the
Susceptible to.
linkage there.
Yeah, I think we're so susceptible to that branding, that marketing.
Yeah, because it hits us from all different sides, from going to
Constantly.
school to wars to, going to Target.
Right. I mean, we talked about this a little bit the other day. Political rhetoric and the corporate marketing very much go hand in hand. Companies are wrapping themselves in democracy flavored branding. Have it
Yeah.
your way. Vote with your wallet. The customer's always right. And politicians are going and using free markets as a shorthand for freedom, linking deregulation and tax policy directly to democracy itself.
Yeah.
And I think that those are kinds of things that we've got to kind of wake up to that brainwashing about and
Yeah.
recognize for what they really are.
Because it's linking our American pride
Right.
to money.
Well, and I think that there is some solid foundation in that. I think our economic system is what has allowed us to become the nation that we are. It's at least a part of it.
It's a part of it. It's a part of it. I'll agree with you on that. But I'm not sure that it's not because we haven't been brainwashed into moving in that direction. Because you can
I
have
think that has
capitalism outside of democracy.
you can,
Or
but can
even
you
democracies with less capitalism that is not so upfront as it is in the United States.
Not so
sure, but
patriotic.
Yeah.
sure,
Patriotic is still freaking branding, though.
but how many of those nations have developed to the same level that we have, who have been able to exert the same amount of influence globally that the United States has?
But I think that goes back to our conversation the other day about you and I growing up in the same household. We had the same parents, we had the same opportunities, and we utilized them differently. The outcomes are still different. I think that the same could be said of various countries doing the same thing. And I think that the other bottom line here, it's like when you start playing a game of Monopoly, right? Everybody gets X number of dollars at the start of that, and how you use them is up to you. That isn't reality. Everybody doesn't start off with the same number of dollars, with the same opportunities at their fingertips. And so we've got to be careful about linking all of that, making it. That's where I think the propaganda, at least for me, really comes into play. They are not the same thing. We do not all start from the same place. And so to sit here and hold everybody in this country, every other country individually, like to hold everybody accountable from saying, hey, this was a 100-yard dash and you did it faster than we did. It isn't a 100-yard dash. We don't all start at the same starting line. We don't all have the same metrics by which we're working off of.
Let me back this up here a little bit and see if I can change the phrasing to make it make a little bit more sense. Callie, can you pull off a marketing campaign if the entire campaign is completely lies?
Sure.
Yeah.
Donald Trump just got elected to the White House. Yes, absolutely.
And it wasn't completely lies. If I see a McDonald's commercial and it says all of our hamburgers are flame broiled hamburgers and they're delicious, and every time I go to McDonald's they hand me a pile of shit, am I going to keep going to McDonald's? No.
Okay. I see what you're saying there, but
There has to be at least a kernel of truth to that marketing campaign. It can't be completely 100% falsified if they want that marketing campaign to be successful. I do think that there is a relationship between capitalism and democracy that makes it a successful system. I am not saying that our existing system is perfect or that it is even a great example of the correct way to link capitalism and democracy.
Do you think that I am saying those things?
That's what it seems like.
Okay. I don't believe that you have to have both in order for either of them to survive.
And I would agree with you. I also think that having the two of them paired together so far has been the most successful. And I do think that some of that has to do with the branding.
okay, I can go there with you.
I mean, I can too, so I'm not sure where you're getting something
Yeah,
else
where we're
from.
at crossroads.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yes, the two of them can exist separately of each other. I think together the two of them are better.
Okay.
But I think with that, Boo, we've been sold a bill of goods in some respects
I agree.
that have marketed them as the same thing, not as unique
Someone is
philosophies.
snoring.
Yes, he's snoring. Money, wake up. Wake up. You're snoring too loud. I was wondering if you could hear it or not. I wasn't sure.
I did not hear it.
Oh, it's been for 10 or 15 minutes now. And I was
I
like, my
just
little purple thing wasn't
started
lighting
hearing
up.
it.
Well, I was hearing something, but I would have said it was people talking. I thought it was Dad talking, and that's why I
No, it's
closed
him
my
going, that's you.
kick his butt out.
I have to ask him every time we sit down to record a podcast. I'm like, do you want to be a podcast dog? Because you have to be quiet. Otherwise, you don't get to come in here. And he jumps into the room every time. I want to come in there. I want to be in there. I'm like, okay, but shush.
Yeah.
He's not normally this loud, but today is not that day.
Well, I couldn't identify it that he was snoring. That's funny.
My desk is shaking. Like, what is wrong with you? I tried to kick him a minute ago.
Poor baby.
Like his bed, not him. Exactly.
Okay, where do we step to hear from here?
I want to get back to this because, Callie, I don't think I'm interpreting you. I don't think I'm understanding you correctly is what I'm getting at right now. Because what I am hearing is that we like democracy, but we don't want the capitalism with it. And I'm not sure I agree with that in particular.
I did not hear that.
That's certainly not my intention of what I'm trying to get across. I am
Okay.
trying to get across that they don't have to be linked, and they continuously have been linked by various methods and marketing tactics.
And it seems a little nefarious, really.
Yes.
I mean, that the intention is to say, these are the same thing. And if you don't believe in this one, then you're not American, or you don't
Right.
believe in freedom. But it's not that you need to get rid of one of them.
Right. I think that both of them are a bit out of control right now. But
And I think that is due to them being too closely related.
We agree with you.
which is my point, why I'm going through showing all of these ways, and why in opportunities that have been taken to relate them so hand in hand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just interpreting it incorrectly then.
Is it just a smoke and mirrors kind of thing where we're just going to, we're going to put all of this in front of you and we're going to link it to a key word that generates patriotism in you so
An
that you don't
emotional
really see.
response.
Yeah. You don't really see
Yeah.
what we're doing on the other side.
Right, which is kind of my point.
And that I agree with. I think our current utilization of both systems is resulting in neither one of them really being
Great.
Because the
true.
truth is, I think for capitalism, for me to think that capitalism is really beneficial, I think even you have talked about, it should be that the best product comes to market. And a lot of times because of the way that we do capitalism, it's whoever has the most money is what comes to market, not the best product.
Yeah, I'm 100% there with you, because that should be the goal of capitalism, is that the best product
Yeah.
wins.
And so
The
I think we've
result that
overshot it.
I would agree, because the result now is whoever can suffocate any competition is who wins.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
And
don't think that should be the goal.
And that isn't democracy either.
Agree. That's feudalism. It's economic feudalism, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think it's really fascinating how closely, and I see it more growing up as a kid during the Cold War of, the Soviets are bad and the Americans are good. The Americans are for freedom. The Americans are for, free enterprise. And that's not what the Soviets are going to give you. And we don't want the Soviets to, have any influence on anybody else because, they're bad. And somehow that's got linked together so that we don't even think of them individually. Anything regarding capitalism is democracy, and that's just not true.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree.
So maybe then we need to hop into the comparative systems, like other ways that people have paired them, that societies have paired democracy and capitalism more or less, like the weight of them. It's
You
always
said
going to
something
equal.
a while ago, Boo, about who else, and I wanted to go China, because they have such a large influence on world economy.
Sure, but China would not be a linkage of democracy and capitalism.
No, but it was the way you said it. Think of somebody else who doesn't pair these, and I thought, China,
Right.
let's go.
Do you
Let's
think
go to
China
these.
does it better?
No, it was just an answer to your question.
I think that there is a case to be made for everybody doing some facet of it better and everybody doing some facet of it worse.
Yeah.
I think that is true, but I also think that when you're trying to tally it up, you have to consider all of the facets, not necessarily individual facets.
Which I think is more in line with what I have set up for this comparative systems. So let's talk about a couple of places that have democracy, but have less influence of capitalism. So I'm going to immediately jump into the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. So they have what would be classified a very high weight of democracy, regular elections, proportional representation, robust civil liberties, a very high voter turnout, especially in comparison to the United States. They also participate in capitalism. They have thriving market economies with global corporations. Think Volvo or IKEA or Spotify. People start businesses, they invest, and they trade freely. That is kind of the underlying premise of capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doing all of these things, and then you've got the democracy. They can go and make choices and take action in ways that impact their day-to-day on a small and a big scale. The twist here kind of tends to be they practice what is called like social democracy or Nordic capitalism. They have really high tax funds that fund universal health care. They have free education, including college. They have a very generous paternal leave programs and really strong social safety nets that in many cases we don't have here, right? So in a system like these, capitalism generates wealth and democracy steers how it's distributed. So we're taking X percentage of this via taxes so that we can make better over here in these other places where we don't have the money invested naturally. So the question here becomes, does it still classify as capitalism if the state is regulating or the country is regulating and redistributing profits? Or is it democracy in their economy too?
Well, I mean, I think the answer to that question is it's complicated, but
So much new.
yeah,
I was gonna say the same. It's nuanced.
yeah. Would you
Sorry,
say
babe.
that they have more democracy than we do?
Yes, I would.
Would you say that they have more capitalism than we do?
I think you would have to define those metrics more
I
specifically.
don't know that it's either one, that they have more of either one. They're just distributing it differently.
So I think that this is a great time to talk about the 30% chance of changing public policy. Cole, we've talked about this from that video. I mean, there has been lots of research done on if 100% of the American public wants something versus 0% of the American public wants something, the chances of policy being enacted via our leadership, our representative democracy leadership, is still 30%.
Across the board,
Across
regardless.
the board. Doesn't matter what the topic is, doesn't matter how many people want it or don't want it, how many people are for or against it. There's a 30% chance that policy will be enacted. Now, Cole, you mentioned research the other day that is supposed to be in direct correlation of that, but instead of the percentage of the public wanting, it's the percentage of money that is being put behind it.
It's the
If
same
we
study.
Yeah, I mean, but if we put enough money behind it, then we can get the policy enacted.
So tell me the money part, because I don't remember that part. I only remember the
So
voting part.
when you take the population as a whole and consider the public sentiment, their desire for or against certain regulation, there is virtually zero correlation between public sentiment and legislation. Because
Okay.
regardless of whether we really want it or we really don't want it, there is roughly a 30% chance of legislation getting passed. However, the higher your net worth, the tighter the correlation is to sentiment and the probability of legislation getting passed. So if you have a much higher net worth, there is a much greater likelihood of something you do want getting passed and something you don't want not getting passed. Are you tracking with me there?
Yeah, I am. I'm just trying to pull that in. So with the 30% that we originally talked about, if 100% of people want this, there's a 30% chance. But if one of those people is wealthy and wants it, that raises that percentage significantly.
We're talking about two different groups of data. We're talking about
Okay.
two different correlations. When you
Okay.
talk about everyone, the population as a whole, there's no correlation. 30%
Okay.
chance. When you talk about
Okay.
just the population of people, and you can get smaller and smaller population sizes due to net worth, the higher your net worth is, the more correlated it is to whether your sentiment matters, whether your sentiment aligns with policy that is enacted.
Okay. I'm with you. I'm tracking.
So is that still democracy? I would say no.
That's not one vote,
Well,
one person, one vote.
it's democracy for a select group of people.
I mean,
That doesn't count.
I wouldn't disagree with you. But, you know, it's not all that far off from the original form of democracy that was built in by the Constitution, where it was basically just wealthy landowners that had the ability
Yeah.
to vote.
but there was great debate on that also.
Sure. And I think there should be.
I just don't know that I can call it democracy if it's based on how wealthy you are. If the circle gets smaller based on your wealth, then I don't know how that's democracy.
I think we have a misconception of what democracy is.
I thought it
I
was
think
one person, one vote.
not necessarily. It is a group of people that get together and vote on what happens. Our version of democracy is supposed to be one person, one vote. But
Okay.
historically speaking, democracy has been concentrated across people with influence, people with capital. So, and I'm not saying that that is the right way to do it. I think that we have been sold a bill that says this is what democracy is,
Yeah.
but that's not necessarily what democracy is.
It's one
Now,
vote. It's one person, one vote from your perspective.
well, and maybe it should be one
One
person, one
person.
vote across the entire population.
I thought that was the goal.
But and for our society, I think that may be an admirable goal. But I don't think that that is inherently what democracy is. That may be the version of democracy that we want and should strive for.
Yeah.
But again, I think it has to do with the marketing. We've been sold this picture of democracy that is one person, one vote. Everybody is equal. But the reality of the system is that that is nor has ever really been the case.
So let's go back. Cal, you talked about the Scandinavian countries that are democracies, but they use their capital differently, but they are still capitalist in that they have the freedom to be entrepreneurs and grow their businesses and create product and sell that product. So give me another one.
So then you've got India. India is considered the world's largest democracy with over 900 million eligible voters.
And yet, as I think of India and their caste system,
Yep.
and knowing there is a group of people simply because of who they were born from, who are completely poverty stricken.
Well, you have to
With
think
no-
about how old and or young their democracy actually is. India sustained democratic governance and since their independence was formed in 1947. That's less than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's
But
all
again,
very new.
you don't think of it's hard for me to think of them as a democracy because they're of that caste system.
Yes.
It's like you say, Cole, instead of wealth identifying who that pocket perception of democracy is, it's birth
Mhm.
that's identifying that.
Yeah. So there are certainly flaws within it. Corruption, the caste politics, the religious tensions. This is all very, very much at play. But at the end of the day, at the end of this day, there's a 75-year-old democracy. They're still learning too and still trying to figure it all out.
But
They're
they're
still
still a
having to
democracy.
fight all of those different things, all of that corruption, that caste system, who weighs more. Wait, we have to get that line of thinking out of our heads. One person, one vote.
Being a
And that
democracy
takes
doesn't just
time.
magically fix everything.
Right. Right. And so India is also utilizing capitalism a little bit different. So for decades after their independence, again in 1947, India followed a state-led socialist style economy. They had government-controlled banks. They had heavy industries and trade. And then in 1991, a balance of payments crisis forced sweeping economic liberalization. So since then, capitalism has driven rapid growth, creating a tech sector boom and lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. There is still
Sure.
absolutely inequality that is running rampant. They're working
Yeah.
on it.
But look at how many corporations are outsourcing to India.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talked not too long ago about there are areas within India that they have built that, I mean, they look like what our Las Colinas looks like, but, with just mega buildings everywhere, but they're all serving U.S. companies. So that's just a different type of capitalism.
Well, and I think that shows, like India specifically shows that democracy can thrive without capitalism at its core. And it ran as a democracy for decades before opening to free markets. But then once capitalism arrived much later in the scheme of things, while it brought growth, it also introduced new tensions between the ultra wealthy and those still in deep poverty. Those caste systems, while they've kind of thrown them out ideologically, they're still there.
Yeah.
I think that it goes to show that, especially the US idea that capitalism is a prerequisite for democracy, isn't the only option. And again, this is me not coming in saying India's doing it better than we are, we should be like them, or Scandinavian countries are doing it better than we are, we should do, or the
Or toss
opposite.
capitalism.
Yeah, or the opposite. Nobody's doing it well. We're doing it great. They're doing it great. Somebody should follow so and so. It's just different marks on the same kind of plane here. Comparisons. I think especially when you're talking about India, if democracy is about equality, what happens when capitalism creates billionaires on one side of the street and slums on the other? You've already got those caste systems that they're trying to kind of break out of. I mean, is that not gentrification by taxation at its finest?
But don't we have the same thing here in America where
Yeah.
we have mega millionaires and people who can't afford to eat? And I'm not saying that's a negative to capitalism.
But it
If
sure is a
anything,
hard pill to swallow.
I think it's for us saying this is what democracy is, but not holding our feet to the fire to be democratic in all actions. And if you really gave every individual in America one vote and it had nothing to do with their wealth, what would change?
I think that that's a really good question. What might that look like? And I think social media is a really good example of how scary that can be. Because
What do you
think
mean?
about it, social media doesn't have the same preference. You can be as poor as they come and be a TikTok star and grow your wealth that way. You don't have to be a mega millionaire to go and become a mega millionaire. Social media has shown us that so many perspectives are valid to lots of different people. I think that we should look, what was it? I think it was 2023. The United States specifically experienced, maybe it was 2022, but the United States experienced more growth in the millionaire segment than had ever been the case in history, in
Yeah.
our country's history. More people became millionaires that year than had ever before.
Yeah.
Like, we had 6 times the number of millionaires than had ever been recorded total. And it wasn't because if you start looking at how those people made their money, how they became millionaires, it's almost all based in social media, whether that is crowdsourcing ideas and taking them and running with them, but it gave a new platform and a new opportunity for people to step up and make money in a way that suited them. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom who's making videos about how to make healthy lunches quick and fun, or whatever it may be, social media kind of leveled the playing field in some capacities to say, hey, you can do this too. All you need is your phone.
I do think there's some additional context, some additional nuance to that I don't think should take away from that point, but I do think that it may dull its edge a little bit. Going back to inflation, if there are more dollars in supply, if those dollars are worth less, in theory, that should make it easier to become a millionaire. But being a millionaire post inflation is less meaningful. Becoming a millionaire in 2022 isn't as meaningful as becoming a millionaire in 1990.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can't buy the same thing with $1 million today that you could buy in 1990 with $1 million.
Or 2015.
Yeah.
And so I do think that that's important context to know.
So are there places that are successful capitalists that aren't democracies?
Yes, there are. So you've got places like Singapore, who formally is a parliamentary republic, but in practice is dominated by one party, the People's Action Party, since their independence in 1965. So again, also relatively new in that independence and choice. Elections happen, but opposition is limited. Media is tightly regulated. Free speech and assembly are constrained. They have wildly successful. They have a wildly successful free market economy, one of the richest countries per capita in the world. They're very definitely known for
Wow.
their business-friendly policies, low taxes, and are a major finance and trade hub. This is where it starts to get kind of kind of hairy. It's capitalism without liberal democracy. That's what Singapore is. Citizens can buy luxury cars and live in futuristic skyscrapers, but they can't freely protest. They can't criticize the government, and certainly without risk. So, is economic freedom enough if political freedom is limited? You can
It's
own
a
a
great question.
Lamborghini, but not start a protest. Does that mean you're actually free?
I
It
guess that's
depends.
your definition of freedom.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what your end goal as an individual is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely it does. And
That's
that can
such
be,
a fascinating question.
yeah, and it can be answered very differently by any person that you ask.
Yeah.
So then, Mom, you brought up China earlier. So China has no democracy in a Western sense, right? They have one authoritarian party that is state-led by the Communist Party of China. Elections exist only at a very local village level. But from a capitalism standpoint, China officially calls its system socialism with Chinese characteristics. In practice, it's more of a hybrid. They've got private businesses that thrive in many areas. Think Alibaba or Tencent or ByteDance, BYD. Then they have foreign investment that is pouring in, but the state is still controlling key industries and can intervene at any point, a little bit or a lot. So I think that you could sit here and look at China and say that China has shown that you can have market-driven economic growth without democratic governance at all. It has lifted more than 800 million people out of poverty, but it's restricted their political freedoms in that process. I think it all is a balance.
And yet you look at so much of what I see about China, if you're reading about it, is, I mean, they built heavily for business properties and then nobody would rent them. So they've spent all of this money, but they have no renters there.
Can't
And they're
afford them.
twisting that to, try to play that to the people, not as a mistake of their government. And so it's
You know, that's just a Western opinion on it.
Right.
true,
It looks
true.
different than mine, so it doesn't count.
I really think of China more as w- being so limiting of what you can think. I think of religion is the thing that pops right into my head. Is they want you to only have this, a state approved religion, not any other type of religion, and they've varied at that. It's sometimes they've easily turned their head on that sometimes, and then sometimes they've not. And,
Mhm.
people have gone to jail for that. So it's really, and again, called, that's my American viewpoint. And I don't really know.
We have to consider the marketing spin in that too.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if the American government said, "Hey, you can only have X number of children"?
You can only go to Southern Baptist churches.
And you can't talk about any other.
Yeah. So
And
is
you can have this business, but we may take it away from you and we may control it and we may set all of the guidelines on how it's run.
right. So that begs the question, is China's authoritarianism wearing a capitalist mask, or is it capitalism wearing an authoritarian mask?
You for the former, personally.
Interesting question.
So again, these are just a couple of examples of various places around the globe who balance and rate that differently.
Yeah.
Capitalism and democracy, it doesn't always have to go hand in hand, and sometimes it works better, and sometimes people are happier, and sometimes people like it more, and sometimes people like it less, and it doesn't work well. I mean, like, it's just all ratios and proportions of a little of this, a little bit of that, and what you're willing to
And marketing.
take. Yeah, and marketing, how we say it. So maybe democracy and capitalism are more like neighbors who share a fence. Sometimes they get along great. Sometimes they're throwing shit over the wall at each other.
What's the old saying? Good fences make good neighbors.
Because I think that specifically goes to show, like, everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has a different viewpoint going into these things. Everybody's taking a different viewpoint and perspective away from all of the marketing spin and what that looks like and means. And just because I took it this way doesn't mean that you have to or you won't be successful.
Yeah.
There's
I,
so
I,
much variety.
I'm not sure that it's that democracy undermines or enhances capitalism. I think there's just a message there of how it's linked
Yeah. What you
that
do with
makes
it.
Yeah,
us.
I think it certainly can. I think that democracy in general can and should be used as a tool to harness capitalism, because
Oh,
capitalism is the engine where democracy is the steering wheel or the gas pedal, if you will. And pure, unfettered capitalism leads to, in my opinion, something that looks a lot like feudalism or eventually just authoritarianism, because whoever ends up with all of the dollars has all of the control. So, utilizing that democracy to carefully regulate capitalism, I think, is one of the most, if not the most promising systems that we have witnessed. But I do think that there is also potential in that for democracy to stifle capitalism to a certain degree if it is over leveraged, which is why I keep referencing, I don't know how many podcasts in a row this is, where I've talked about carefully regulated capitalism, not necessarily heavily, but carefully, because you have
Yeah.
to put these things in place that protect individuals without capital from individuals with capital. And I don't think that we're set up to do that very well right now.
but I think also it has certainly been in my news feed, and I suspect it has been for you guys too. Look at what has been going on with Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and all of these different people who are being canceled, some quite literally in their shows. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel just recently, his show was suspended
Suspended.
indefinitely, I believe is what Disney
Yeah.
called it. Um, and then the people who don't have nearly as much money all started voting with their dollars and canceling their Disney Plus subscriptions and doing all of these things and making a big, huge scene. And they backed off and said, okay, never mind. We'll put Jimmy back on. And it wasn't because a whole bunch of people really loved Jimmy Kimmel. I'm sure that there was some of that, but it was because they felt like their rights were being infringed upon. If we let this happen, what's next? And so you saw a big, huge corporation back down.
I think that's a shining example of capitalism operating in a similar fashion to democracy.
I would agree.
Yeah. I think
I
that's
still
where we
think that
got.
we have to be very careful about that, because do you think if Disney had the choice, they would do the same thing? Do you think
If
if
their
Disney
bottom
didn't have
line wasn't involved,
yeah, do you think if they could ensure their control over everything that goes over their waves and they're just guaranteed their subscription anyways,
right?
that the same thing would have happened? Probably not.
Yeah.
But I think,
I don't
again,
think
that
so.
kind of links us back to Citizens United with corporations becoming just as regulated as people.
Unregulated.
Yeah.
Unregulated, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being treated as people. and having the same rights and opportunities that people are supposed to have.
We're definitely going to have to do a podcast on Citizens United just
For
to
sure.
explain and walk through that.
Yep. I mean, so I kind of go back to what I said at the very beginning in the intro. Is democracy the square and capitalism is the rectangle? Or is it all just kind of what we've been told?
I'm not sure that that's the best analogy anymore, because while they do operate similarly and have some principles that are the same, they think of the way to phrase this. I think they're both parts of a mechanism that can be utilized. And when utilized well together, they make a machine that works well. But
Sure.
when if you have a giant 12-cylinder engine and you try and put it on a cardboard frame, probably not going to work out all that well.
So, Cal, I don't know if I can. I can't make the square and rectangle. While I understand that, I'm with Cole. I'm not sure it's appropriate here. I mean, but it's also not a square, a square peg in a round hole. But maybe they're just two squares together, and
But they're not.
sometimes
They're
Serious?
not. And they're not because one is a whole political system and the other is an economic political.
that's why I think they're both two squares, and maybe sometimes each one of them morphs into a rectangle, but they're really just two independent squares that sometimes influence the other one.
There's always going to be overlap, but that doesn't guarantee that they have to be the same. They have to go hand in hand to work together.
Yeah. I think they're more cogs in a mechanism. So,
Yep.
Maybe I can make this analogy, and I used it a little bit earlier. You talk about capitalism being the engine and democracy being the gas pedal and the steering wheel, and I am a little bit concerned that what we are slowly becoming is where they're kind of changing places, where capitalism is becoming the steering wheel and the accelerator, the gas pedal, and it is trying to force democracy to be the engine. And I
Yep.
don't know that that is the best way to utilize either one of
No.
them.
that
Yep.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Interesting discussion, and not what I really had ever thought about before.
It's
And
incredibly nuanced.
I just think more than anything, I'm a little ticked that we've been manipulated in how to think about democracy. And I think it takes away from what our intention for democracy really, what we say that intention is.
Yes.
What
Because
we
if you
want
really,
democracy to be and what our democracy actually is aren't
yes,
really the same thing.
yes,
But we've been sold that they are.
it's been colored. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So,
I mean, I think my takeaway really was that they don't have to go hand in hand, democracy and capitalism. But when they do, when we choose to put them together, it's messy. It requires constant negotiation from both sides, just like any relationship.
and what kind of regulation, Boo?
Careful.
Careful regulation. Yeah. Okay. Got a weird thought for me?
I do. Speaking of capitalism, I want to talk Amazon reviews. So
Okay.
I know, bear with me. So how often do you guys skip reading at least one Amazon review before you buy a product?
Very
Sometimes.
rarely.
Yeah. But if it's a new product for me, something I'm definitely, I don't know that I ever buy clothes anymore that I don't read the reviews, read all the details.
Yep. So go ahead.
You know me, I'm a research nerd. I'm going to go through and read all of the entire stat sheet, and then I'm going to go through and read at least a few reviews to say, okay, does this stat sheet line up with what everybody else is saying?
Yeah.
So my kind of weird thought this week is, What if we had readily available, just like Amazon reviews, what if we had those same reviews available for politicians, the same way we do for products on Amazon? So you could sit down and read somebody else's review of Ted Cruz. I think he did a great job. I think he did a horrible job. Whatever it may be, everybody could weigh in on their politicians saying, hey, this is how they've worked. This is what it was like when they were the school board member,
Mm-hmm.
city councilman. This is how they've functioned. She's definitely true to her word, or was so disappointed in this.
I'm a Texan. I'm a New Yorker, and how that plays into that individual, how they see that individual.
Yeah,
That's a fascinating idea.
I think
You
it would
know,
be interesting.
I do think it would be interesting, but it's one of those things where I think in order for it to really work, everyone would have to be well informed, paying attention to what's going on, and participating.
Participating, yes. I don't think everybody has to be well informed. How often do you see they're my absolute favorite. When you
I know
see an
exactly what
Amazon
you're going to
review
say.
and it's like, this product was blue and I thought it was going to be red, and the entire thing in the whole product description talks about a blue one. Like,
Yeah.
then I can
Right,
immediately read that review and go, these idiots.
right.
I mean,
But
I think
what if everyone who left the review was that way and it's a good product that now has 1 star? That's what I'm kind of alluding to. So
And
everybody, like
maybe
in
you should be a better politician / product to get better reviews.
And I agree with that aspect of it. But here's the thing. I'm going to give you this example. There's a video game that I'm playing right now called Helldivers 2. They have a cosmetic item in that they gave for free to all of the players that is a cape that you wear, and they call it the Bars of Liberty. And looks kind of like a really stretched out upside down cell signal tower, because it's like a short red bar and then a little bit long one, and then it's got this really, really long one. And what that is representative of is a period in time where the publisher of Helldivers decided that they were going to enact this policy that said everybody who wants to play this game has to have this specific type of subscription membership, even if they're playing on a system that doesn't utilize that subscription service, because this game was available on PlayStation and it was available on PC. And Sony, the publisher, came out and said, everybody who's playing this game, regardless of what system you're on, they have to have a Sony membership. Well, people on PC don't need a Sony membership because they're not on PlayStation. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden on Steam, they went and not only the people who played the game, but people within the gaming community who don't play the game went on Steam and started leaving bad reviews. The developer didn't make this
Deservedly.
decision, but hear me out. The game creators did not make this decision. The developers did not make this decision. Someone else made that decision for them, and now their game looks really bad. And they were really proud of that. So they took essentially their scale of this review bombing that occurred of people who weren't playing the game, who weren't
Oh.
participating, and they made a cosmetic feature out of it to say, hey, we're on your side. We agree with you. We don't have any control over this. So that's what I'm alluding
What a
to
weird
is
reaction.
right. Well, but
But I think that makes people fight for what they believe in that much more. As the game developer, you're frustrated, then you're not going to sell a game to whoever it is, to Sony like that again, because you know that they're going to take it and run it into the ground. So all of your hard work is completely for naught because of the decision that somebody else made that you had no control of.
You're getting those kinds of reviews so people don't go and buy it,
Yeah.
or they boycott Sony, or they yell at Sony. To
Right.
understand that.
Which
so
is
what if people
exactly what
left
happened with
reviews for
Jimmy
James
Kimmel.
Tallarico on Greg Abbott's decisions? They said, oh, well, James Tallarico didn't fight hard enough.
Then you're going to have to be educated enough to say, this isn't about him.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
You
my whole
are so funny.
point. I'm so mad that it's red. Okay, you're a moron.
Yeah.
It says it's blue. I can't help you that you thought it was going to be red.
I think with any rating system, you're going to get that person who is in La La Land and not a
Yes.
clue of what they're rating. But I
Yeah.
still think the rating system could work. And I think if you apply that to politicians, it's a very it's an interesting idea. I'm with you, Callie. I would love to see what Ted Cruz's rating turned out to be,
Yeah.
on Amazon.
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
It goes back to that same thing for me. It has to be very carefully regulated, something like that. Because
Yeah.
again, you can have, how many times have you gone on Amazon, seen a product that has 5,000 5-star reviews? Amazon used to have a rampant problem with this. The reviews were for a different product.
Yeah.
There were 5,000 reviews and you order it thinking that, oh, this has got 4.5 stars, and you get it and it's a piece of crap.
I'm still willing to do this for politicians. Even
I'm-
if they put James Tellerica on Ted Cruz, I'm still willing to do this for politicians because I can weed out some of those,
Exactly.
but I still get an idea of who that politician is.
Yep.
Let's do it, Cal. How do we get a rating system on our politicians? Go for it. Y'all figure that out for me.
I am not at all saying that it's a bad idea, because I don't think it is. I'm just saying that it requires some additional thought.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Don't disagree with you on that, but I guess it's that thing of I'm willing to make a misstep forward just to have made a step forward. So, okay. Who's got my good story? Good
I
news
got
story.
you. I got you. So, at a recent show in Spokane, Washington, comedian Drew Lynch paused mid-set when he saw a man in distress. An audience member, his name is Dick Windy, had gone into cardiac arrest
Oh, gosh.
in the middle of this comedy show. Instead of everything devolving into chaos or frustration, the audience jumped in to help. There was an EMT, there were several ER nurses and things like that sitting in the audience who started CPR. Other people rotated in to help to take that responsibility on. They cleared space for the paramedics when they arrived. They called for help in the first place so that these people could sit down and make sure that they're taking care of him. Mr. Windy was without a pulse for over 5 minutes.
Oh, gosh.
But by the time that the paramedics arrived, they'd brought him back. These people in the audience who were just sitting there watching a show.
At a comedy show.
Yeah. So the comedian, Drew Lynch, later called it the most incredible and beautiful thing I've ever seen. A room full of strangers working together to save someone else's life. So the man survived, and the comedian and a couple of other people went and visited him in the hospital to go and finish his set. So he got to see the end of the show. But it was so cool to watch. So after the EMTs and the paramedics take Mr. Windy out, Drew stands there just in awe. I mean, he is incredibly emotional, and he's like, I don't even know where to go from here. You guys came together. You fix this. And I'll make sure I post a link to the video in the show notes, because it is so cool and is so neat. I mean, he's just dumbfounded. I don't even know what would have happened. So Mr. Windy's son, Nathan, has come in and he has said, without those people, my dad wouldn't be here. And so it was just such a cool situation where you had all of these people who weren't worried about how it would make them look or finishing their drink or annoyed that their show that they came to watch has completely gone off of the rails. They just stepped up to help save this man's life.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
They're good people.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that one.
I did too.
That's a good story. I hope he's doing well.
Yep. Me too.
And I really can't imagine if your show gets disrupted by something that massive. I mean, you could be pissed off about that.
Yeah.
Or you could just walk away and not finish it and not say anything. But
I've got better to do.
Yeah, I think I got the next stop to go to.
Mhm.
I think there's lots of things in there, and that there were people who were willing to help and push
And
things aside to make sure this happened, and then him to recognize that was phenomenal and to address it.
yeah,
That's fun.
it was
Good
really
story.
cool.
Good story. All right. Well, I think we have some things to think about, especially on our democracy, because I think, like I said, I'm afraid we've been fed a bill of goods, and we need to think about that and, address
Time
it
to
at
do
least
some
in our own
accounting.
minds. Do what, babe?
Time to do some accounting.
Yeah. So
Agreed.
thanks for having the conversation with me.
You guys.
Love y'all.
Love you guys.